I I think it's time that we touch on this player. And maybe with that kind of segue, you guys know who I'm talking about. And I'm interested to hear what Justin has to say. It's not Baylor Shireman, so don't worry about that. It, we're talking.
No, it's not Jordan
You know
Walsh.
what?
Everybody calm down.
He's killing it in Maine, so I got to give him credit. He's killing it in Maine. But like when he's doing trick shots and warm ups, he just no shame or no Franco, no applause.
All right, well let's talk about Jaylen Brown.
Okay. Let's talk about him.
Let's talk about him because Jaylen Brown has not been bad this year. Hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been great. And some game it feels like Jaylen Brown here is having an every other game type of season where it's like, Friday night you were awesome, but Sunday night it was rough. But then Tuesday night it was great, but then Thursday night it was rough. And obviously Jaylen Brown missed their 4 games earlier on in the year due to that little hip injury, guys. Now tonight, Jaylen Brown, let me tell you something. Bucks score wise, it wasn't awful. 21 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists. He did not shoot efficiently from the floor, 7-21. But it felt like he sucked the air dry out of the Celtics offensive fluidity tonight, guys. So what did Jaylen Brown not do tonight that he should have done? And there's a lot.
Here's the thing. I thought with Jaylen Brown, I felt there were moments where the momentum was with everybody except for Brown. And when that happened, the ball found its way into Brown's hands every single time. And to me, and I said that coming out of a timeout, I said we were talking about how Jason Tatum and Peyton Pritchard, the ball needs to find them. And I made the joke saying, oh, well, that means that the ball is going to find nothing but Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday. Well, out of that timeout, Jaylen Brown dribbled it off his foot, turned the ball over. And then out of that same timeout, after that, Drew Holiday missed a 3. So I couldn't have been more right about that.
Right.
I did want to mention this when we were talking about Peyton Pritchard a few minutes ago. When Peyton Pritchard gets to the basket and he penetrates, he is so controlled. He has such good body control. He has such good ball control. He's just it's just one motion for him. When I look at and when I watch Jaylen Brown drive to the basket, I feel as if, and here's the thing, this dude's great. I hate talking about that. Like, it makes me feel like I'm talking crap about Jaylen Brown because I don't want to disrespect JB. He's done phenomenal things for us, but I feel like Jaylen Brown just isn't that controlled when he gets around into the paint,
or he hasn't been at least, and he was last year.
And but if we're talking about right now, I haven't seen it from him.
Right. I agree.
I just haven't seen it from him. And I feel as if when the ball is in when Jaylen Brown catches it on the perimeter, it's not a swing or it's not a let's set up a motion. It's an ISO. It's almost a guaranteed ISO. And I just feel like that's not a sustainable, successful offense. And I just feel like the Celtics don't benefit off that whatsoever. And you talk about the pick and roll. You talk about how well Derek White and Jason Tatum and Peyton Pritchard is in the pick and roll. I don't think Jaylen Brown has been all that great in that type of action. I think he's really struggled, and I think it gets to a point where he backs his way to the rim, and all of a sudden he gets stuck, and he either turns the ball over or he has to shoot a contested fadeaway jump shot. Right, and I feel like those are the only 2 options we've really seen outside that 3-point line for Jaylen Brown. I don't want to make excuses for the guy, but this hip thing has been bothering him for quite some time.
That was my next part of
time for it. And I'm not making excuses because he has had some significantly great games since his return from injury. But it's almost like I don't know if he's uncomfortable. I don't know if that injury is still lingering. I don't know if it's bothering him. I don't know if some nights he's great. It feels good. Other nights it just feels horrible. I don't know where he's at with that injury. But as of late, I have not been the biggest JB guy. specifically in this game. I don't think he helped Boston whatsoever in this game, especially down the stretch. And I hate talking like that, man, because you guys know how I feel about Jaylen Brown. I heard Ian talking some crap about JB in the podcast a few weeks ago, and I had to call him out on it. You know that, Rob. I called Ian out on that. Don't disrespect JB like that. But that's just the reality of it. I think Jaylen Brown has struggled very much so in these past few games. And tonight, man, I thought this was going to be another Minnesota game from Jaylen Brown. He came out 3 for 3, firing from long range, felt like he was going to get after it. And efficiency-wise, he just wasn't there tonight. So that's definitely something to keep your eye on. Now, coming up Sunday, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on in the show, our next matchup is the Cavaliers. Donovan Mitchell, his best friend. Who doesn't want to show up his best friend on the biggest stage, right?
It was awful today.
Yeah, talk about terrible. He was what, 5 for 23 today? I mean, really, dude? The one day we need you to go 23 for 23.
And just wait. You know? I know Donovan Mitchell's got some stuff waiting for us. I already know, and we're gonna talk about it. But
Jaylen Brown and Jaylen Brown has stuff waiting for us too. They're both coming off terrible games. Like
I don't want to steer away off Jaylen Brown real quick. Jaylen, I'm sorry. I love you, but you're not home free quite just yet, because Justin mentioned the hip injury, and it feels like, and again, he's been amazing, Finals MVP, right? We're just talking about what we've seen with the sample size we have so far this season. I feel like I have to mention that with the Celtics fan base sometimes. It feels like Jaylen Brown, who has never ever been a very 3-point reliant guy, it feels like now big games from Jaylen Brown this season are only coming when that 3-point shot is falling. Now, you could point to the hip injury, guys, or you could point to Missoula ball. Which one are you pointing to? Because the trend's here. Missoula ball is taking over.
I will say, this might sound cliche. I think I am pointing to take what the defense gives you. These defenses continue to disrespect Jaylen Brown's 3-point game and Jaylen Brown's shot. And listen, if they're gonna leave Jaylen Brown open, I don't care if he has the lowest percentage of that starting 5 from the 3-point arc. Let it fly. I mean, the prime example of that, just a few months ago, last season in March, I believe it was, Golden State leaving Jaylen Brown open the entire first quarter. Jaylen Brown made him pay. They fueled off of that. The first quarter against Minnesota just last week, what happened? Left Jaylen Brown open. Jaylen Brown made them pay every single time. Minnesota broadcasters going nuts. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe Jaylen Brown was making wide open jump shots. The Finals MVP, they couldn't believe we're hitting wide open jump shots. Going hot tonight. I think Jaylen Brown kind of takes what the defense gives you. But I would like to see him. Man, just drop those shoulders. He's one of the most aggressive guards in the entire wings, in the entire association, when he can get to the hoop, draw the foul. I just would like to see more of that, because you're right, Rob. He has been pretty heavily reliant on that 3-point jump shot. And if that 3-point shot is not falling for him, down goes the efficiency.
And quick point, I don't want to blame it on the hip flexor either, because we saw what he did to Jalen Smith in the paint tonight with that amazing. That's probably going to be dunk of the week.
Maybe
so I don't want to call that an excuse.
Yeah. Okay.
Or it's just more impressive with the hip flexor.
I think there's 3 points to hit on Jaylen Brown, and 2 of them kind of go with each other. But number one, first of all, Justin said everything pretty much clearly and made a lot of the points here. But number one is the hip injury, but I don't want to just say it's the hip injury. I don't know if everybody noticed, but coming back from the summer this season, Jaylen Brown added a ton of muscle. Okay, a ton. He came back and it was like, whoa, okay, he's a little bulkier than he was last season in the finals, even in June. And I think some of that was because of the disrespect from being left off the Olympic team. A lot of people not really respecting us as champions, despite us having one of the most dominant seasons in NBA history. Jaylen Brown, he's a very motivated player, and he worked hard over the summer on his body, and that was pretty clear coming into the Abu Dhabi games. Yet, I worry a little bit about players adding muscle for 2 reasons. Number one, and number 2, well, I should say the 2 reasons here, it's going to cover both of Jaylen Brown's deficiencies right now, I should say. Number one is Injuries. We saw he had the hip injury early on in the season. If you have extra muscle, there's more chances for tears. There's extra body weight, which means there's extra weight going on to your knees, your ankles, your hips, of course, in which Jaylen Brown hurt up to this point in the season. But number two, the shot selection. It's really, sometimes you add more muscle. The shot just doesn't, the shot formation doesn't quite fall the same way the feeling isn't quite the same as you think before you added all the muscle on your body. That can really affect a player when they add a lot of muscle. So Jaylen Brown, from adding that muscle, I worry about those two things: his shot formation, and of course injuries, which we're talking about right now, both. And the other 2 points I want to mention, and they kind of go in with each other, is decision making for Jaylen Brown and shot selection. They go kind of hand in hand, which, Justin, again, you kind of talked on both points here. The shot selection for Jaylen Brown, you definitely have to take what the defense gives you, especially if they're going to be wide open shots. But I think at some points in the season so far, Jaylen Brown, these shots have just not been great shots. And it goes along with the decision making in terms of how he's working within the offense. Is he swinging the ball? Is he taking the ball by himself? What kinds of shots is Jaylen Brown really taking? And I think partially what I look at Jaylen Brown is he holds on to the ball too often, too often, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. Jaylen Brown, there are too many portions of the season so far where we've seen him, the ball comes to him, and he's just not really getting rid of it as fast as we want him to get rid of it, whether he's attacking, getting a shot up, or swinging it around the perimeter, getting the ball to another player, either attacking, swinging the ball to somebody else, or simply just swinging the ball around the perimeter. He kind of holds on to the ball a little bit too often. And I really look at that within his game and go, that's easily fixable because it's up here. Right. It's up here. Every time he gets the ball, he doesn't have to dribble for a million seconds. He doesn't have to stand there and look at the defense. I believe there was a shot the other night. I can't remember which game it was in, but it was right at the end of a quarter. It might have been at the end of a game. I think it might have been the Minnesota game, if I'm not mistaken. And we needed, yes, it was at the back end of the Minnesota game, right before Minnesota. They almost hit a buzzer beating 3 on us for the win. Nobody remembers that. That was pretty. Like Nas Reed had a wide open shot for the win. Yet before that, we had the ball up 2, so we won by 2. Of course, we miss a shot. Minnesota misses a shot. We win by 2. But before that, we have the ball up 2. All we need is a 2-pointer to close the game out, because if we make a 2-pointer, it's a 4-point game with about 10 seconds left. And of course, we're doing the foul game, which is one of the biggest detriments to the NBA product. But that's the way it is in the final moments. It's a 3-4 point game. All we needed was a 2-pointer. And what happened? It was Jaylen Brown with the ball, literally held the ball like a football at the top of the perimeter, 30 feet away from the rim for about 10 seconds, and then jacked up a step back 3. I mean, that really goes in with the shot selection and decision making right there. And yes, you could say, well, the Celtics offense wasn't running efficiently the way it should have been on that particular possession and that particular play. But ultimately, that's up to JB and the rest of the offense. JB, you have to attack sooner. If we just need a 2-pointer, why is it a 30-foot step back 3? Why is that the shot we're getting? Why are you holding the ball for 10 seconds? This is what drives me crazy about offenses in the final moments of games, is you'll have players just dribble, ISO, dribble, ISO. And it's like, you guys have been running efficient sets all game.
Welcome to the Boston
What is going
Celtics,
on?
Man. Welcome to watching the Boston Celtics.
Run the set. And it's not just Jaylen Brown, too. I don't want to harp too hard on this player because he had a phenomenal night. But it can be Jason Tatum as well, especially in the final moments of games where we're sitting there going, I mean, really, Jason Tatum's game winner earlier in this season. Now it was in overtime. If anybody remembers, he had 2 moments, and one of them, thankfully, he made it, and it was a highlight of the season. But both shot attempts at the end of regulation and overtime was just Jason Tatum dribbling. And it's like, we've been running offensive sets the whole game. And right now we're going to ISO. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And I think that goes along with JB's game. this season. I expect Jaylen Brown to be better moving forward, which I've said with
Right.
literally everything we've talked about and harped on so far. But that is the realistic expectation that we have with all of this, all these problems for the Celtics early in the season. And I shouldn't say we have a ton of problems because ultimately we are 16-3. It's just the little things. It's just the little things. But I want to note, Jaylen Brown, he turned up in the month of December last year, and we were having these
Right.
conversations about Jaylen Brown
Right.
last year at this point in the season, and in December he turned the corner, went to the next level, and put to rest all that conversation. Eventually, of course, won Finals MVP and became I shouldn't say became, but he challenged Tatum over the summer for who's the best player on the Celtics, and yet now it seems like the conversation is pretty clear. It's Tatum right now, but Jaylen Brown, when he's at his best, we know where he can ascend to within that dialogue.
It's actually funny. I have 2 points to make because my first one is, I said that during the game was I'm interested to see how long this dynamic between Tatum playing at an MVP level and Jaylen Brown kind of teetering around, really, really good and then an off night kind of nightly, because we're used to seeing this. It's like, oh, Tatum's having a great month and a half stretch. When's the plateau coming? In Jaylen Brown, the plateau's here. When's the spike coming? I think that's something that we have to look at. And then my second thought was, guys, is, I was thinking, it's really funny you brought that up, Seamus, because I was sitting there, I was thinking today, if Jaylen Brown some nights or some series is better than Jason Tatum, why is that a bad thing? Like the best duos of all time, one of the two was better than the other one on any given night. Kobe and Shaq. There were so many series where Kobe was better than Shaq. Wade and LeBron. There were so many series where Wade was better than LeBron. Jordan and Pippen. Bird and McHale. Kareem and Magic. I mean, if you look at all the best duos, it's like, oh, wait a second. Believe it or not, 1A wasn't always better than 1B. A good amount of the times, 1B was better than 1A. That's why there's the and in between their two names, because it's not just one. And I think it's funny. I know it's kind of off topic a little bit, but it was a thought that I kind of wanted to put out there eventually into the CTW crew, is what an interesting dynamic we see with Brown and Tatum, because they have been so good for so long now. And tonight, Tatum was phenomenal. Brown, he didn't have the best game. But it's like, guess what, guys? There's going to be some day it could be next game where Jaylen has 40 and JT had a bad shooting night. So I think it's an interesting dynamic to look, right, as we continue to cover these Celtics this season, to look how that plays, how Tatum plays, how Brown plays, how the pendulum swings with our 1A and 1B. I do think that's worth noting.
I'm already waiting real quick. I'm waiting for the stretch here of the season. I don't want to put down Tatum, but he obviously has started out on an MVP kick, and people love him in the conversation of MVP. Like, oh, there's Luka, there's Jokic, there's Giannis, but here's Tatum. This could be his season. But we see it every single year with Brown and Tatum, where Tatum for 3 games, he's not that great, and then Brown, he's breaking out for 3 games, or it's the other way around. Which actually, this is the kick and streak we're on right now. Tatum's amazing, and Brown, he's been up and down, up and down. I believe that's just kind of the dynamic between those two players. And Justin, you said it on a post game last year in January, when both of these players are on and hitting at the same time, the Celtics blow teams out by 30. Right. And so far, we really haven't seen too much of these players on at the same time, Brown and Tatum, that is. And I believe when we start seeing that more often, the Celtics are going to go up to another level. But right now, it's just kind of going back and forth in terms of Brown or Tatum is taking over. But that's really been the trend their entire careers.
That's funny you remember that. That's when I think I rushly said that right before my CO2 alarms were going off in my apartment.
That's probably why I remember that. Because weren't we touching on that the other day? Like, look at all these past post-game moments. I remember when you had to leave.